Okay, so we speaking about the concept of the Merkava, which is the wagon. And we've been speaking about how the few and the rare in Jewish history have had the privilege of being either the wagon or like the wagon, which really refers to this ability to be complete conduits to God Himself, just as a wagon and its wheels are conduits to the rider. Wagon and the wheels will never fight with the rider. They'll never disagree with the rider as to where to go. The rider decides everything. He just uses the wagon in order to get to that destination that he desires. Same year, there are people that are just one with God, that are completely, their ego is completely nullified, that they become true conduits, not just 1 hour a day or for one mitzvah, but really all the time for everything. And those were our forefathers and mothers. And here we're naming also some others on page 100, but let's continue with this idea. It's really analyzing the ego versus the soul, and how the soul can really not just overtake the ego, but even abolish the ego or even expel the ego to the point that it becomes indeed a wagon for God. Let's continue exactly where you said, Margot, top of page 100, second paragraph from the top. Among the greatest leaders of Israel. Does anyone want to read?
I'll
Tanya,
read. I'll read.
please go
Okay.
for it, Margot. Please,
Go
yes.
ahead. Sige.
Among the greatest leaders of Israel, we count the 7 shepherds: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Aaron, Joseph, and David. Moses, in a way, transcends them all. The summit of human perfection, he is the greatest of the prophets. Yet Moses himself is not a chariot. There are 2 frames of reference here. From the viewpoint of human greatness, Moses stood at the summit. On the other hand, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the chariots to the Shekhinah. Moses is not, nor are Aaron or Joseph, while David is in the throne's 4th leg. A person who is a chariot undergoes a nearly biological metamorphosis, and he becomes a progenitor of a new line, a succession that forever transmits this essence to its descendants for all generations.
Right. It's interesting, and I'll confess that I don't fully understand why Moses, for example, is not part of the chariot. But just to outline these 7 shepherds, we see them, by the way, we encounter them on Sukkot, right? Each and every day of Sukkot, during that beautiful festival in which we sit in our sukkah, we are told that we are visited by 7 guests, 1 guest per day. They're called Ushpizin. And those guests are exactly those names mentioned. Abraham on the first day, Isaac on the second, until the last day, David himself comes to visit us. Spiritually, certainly, some have stories about Hasidic masters having actual visions of their physical appearances in the sukkah. But the point is that they come and visit us, and that's where we encounter them. But not all of them, as Rabbi Steinsaltz mentions, are part of that chariot. The chariot has 4 wheels. Merkava, the wagon, has 4 wheels. And here the 4 wheels are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and David. So we skipped a few and we went all the way to David. Why this is so, I'm not entirely sure. I do know that in many ways, Moses wrestled with God. He wrestled with God for God, not against God. And maybe this is why. Aaron was, of course, with Moses, wrestling with God. And in many ways, Joseph also wrestled with himself, wrestled with God too, and wrestled with his brothers at one point. So maybe that takes away his eligibility to be in the wagon. Because if you compare those lives, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and David had more of a fluid connection with God, or more of a wrestle-free connection with God. And perhaps this is why, again, those 3 are not included in the wagon. Also because of the technical fact that wagons only have 4 wheels, so we can't have 7. But I think that's part of the reason. Now, on the other hand, just to refine this idea, let's focus on Moses, as Rabbi Steinsaltz does here in his commentary. Although Moses wrestled with God, as we said, he did it for God. And in many ways, this is what elevated him to the level of being the greatest prophet of all times, greater than Abraham, greater than anyone else on the wagon. Now, why am I saying for God? If we wish, let's just take a snapshot of, let's say we can, three leaders. There's Noah, who came before, he's not even mentioned here. Abraham and Moses, just to show the power of Moses here, although again, he's not mentioned in the wagon. And this is why, by the way, also Moses is called Moshe Rabbeinu. He's a teacher. Rav means teacher. And we call Moshe our teacher. We don't call Abraham our teacher, call him our father. We don't call Noah our teacher. But that's because they in many ways represent three models of leadership. Just think about this. Noah was appointed as the leader, indeed, to save a generation from a flood. And God told him to take his time. It took 120 years to build an ark. Now, why? Because God had hoped that he would save his generation and that he would not need to bring a flood onto planet Earth. And indeed, when people came to visit Noah, he would tell them, hey, I'm building an ark, and they wouldn't believe him, at least according to the Midrash. And he would say to them, well, I'm building an ark because a flood is coming. You better change your ways. And that was his attempt to save the generation. No, he wasn't active. He was much more passive. We waited for people to come to him. And in the end, who does he save? Only himself and his family. And of course, many of the animals and fish and so on. Not fish, sorry, many animals, birds and so on. But that's because that model of leadership doesn't really work. You're passive and you don't show really much care. After all, you weren't the one really trying to actively save people. So that's not a model we follow. Then you have Abraham, who's part of the wagon. But Abraham was active in trying to save destruction, but only in condition of. So think about this. When God decided to destroy the city of Sodom, Abraham, as we are told, stood at the gates of the city and he said to Hashem, please save the city. There might be 50 righteous people in the city. And then what does God tell him? Remember that? He says, well, if there are 50, I'll save the city. And then he can't find 50. So he's down to 40, to 30, to 12, to 20, to 10. When he can't find 10 righteous people, that's when Abraham surrenders and says, okay, fine. I guess the city deserves to be destroyed. So Abraham does take an active stance, unlike Noah, but he only takes it in condition that you're a righteous person. If you are righteous, I like you. I want to save you. If not, then no. Could be outrageous. But that's Abraham's stance. And maybe this is also why he didn't deserve to be the greatest prophet of all times. Moses, on the other hand, becomes our teacher. Why? Because when God threatens the destruction of the Jewish people, when after the sin of the golden calf, God said to Moses, I want to destroy this nation and I'll make you into a nation. Moses could have become, the greatest of greats in history by him becoming now the new nation. And what does Moses respond? He says, no, I'm sorry. Either you accept the Jewish people as they are, not in condition that they become righteous, as they are. And if not, then erase me from your books. Erase me. That's the ultimate leader. He takes a stance. He wrestles with God, for God. Because at the end of the day, the Jewish people and God are interconnected. So he says, either you accept them or you can erase me. No, you're not going to make a great nation out of me. I don't buy that. And that's the ultimate model. You love a person for who he is, not for what he can become, not for the righteous person, for who he is as he is. That's the ultimate model. In many ways, that's really what God also wants. God, in many ways, rewards Moses for that. And we see that in other places too. But So he's not completely nullified, but it's not because his ego is not nullified. He didn't have an ego, but it's because he cared for the greater picture, cared for the people. So that wagon wrestled with the rider a little bit. And that's in Moses' case. There's in Joseph's case, there's other examples and so on. So he didn't deserve to be in the wagon. But on the other hand, he deserved to be the greatest prophet of all times. And that becomes a teacher, our model. That's what we should follow. That's the ultimate mitzvah of loving your fellows yourself, not to deviate here from the idea of the wagon, but I love people for who they are, not for what they can become. That's true in parenting. We often love our children before what they can become. Oh, if you
Rabbi,
behave, then I love you. I'll reward you. If not, then no. And children feel that. Yes, we have expectations, but our love is not dependent on that. Yes, William.
I have two comments to make.
Please.
First of all, I always had trouble with the story of Sodom and Gomorrah because if they were not 10 tzaddikim, how do you condemn children and children's children, future generations? I have trouble with that one, number one. Number two, I think the greatest wrestler in the group of seven was Yaakov. He's the one who actually physically wrestled,
Right.
but it seems that he probably wrestled with himself.
Right. No, that's a good point, and that's exactly it. Just to relate to number two, I'll get to number one. That's right. Jacob didn't wrestle with God; he wrestled with himself. There's tremendous commentaries on about that night of wrestling that he had, in which he was left alone. Vayivater Yaakov levado, as the verse says, he was left completely alone. And then an angel or someone came to fight with him. Some say it was the representative of Esav because he was meeting him the next day. And some say, like you just said, that no, he was just wrestling with himself. And when he finally was able to embrace his full self and to stop chasing after being that firstborn, after wanting the blessings of Esav and so on, that's when his name was upgraded or changed to Israel. So that's right. But regarding number one, I also have issues. There's things that I don't think we can fully understand. I mean, after all, God, the creator of the human being, can understand or predict how a human being will become and not become. But we find that in many ways, we find that in other places, in a rebellious son, for example, that never existed, but that a rebellious son can be killed, according to Deuteronomy, the Ben Soreru More, and they point out that someone so evil, and again, never existed, never took place. There was never a case in which parents took their rebellious son and could prove the bet in that he was rebellious and that they deserved the death punishment. But it's just a theoretical part of the Torah. But they point out that that's because he's become so evil that nothing good can come out of it. Or for example, when the Midrash points out that when Moses killed that Egyptian slave master in the defense of a Jew, that he looked into his future and he made sure that nothing good can come out of him, and then he killed him. So no, I don't know how God functions. I really don't. And it's up to God to answer these questions. How can you kill an entire city? I really don't know. And if there's an answer to that, but we have to trust that he knows what he's doing as the creator of human beings. But again, I'm going back to the point of loving your fellow as yourself. That's what love means. I accept you for who you are, fully. I'm not expecting anything of you unless you're my child. But again, my love is not dependent on those expectations. It's just pure love. I love you, no matter what. And not something that's so easy to achieve sometimes, right? Especially when you have teenagers at home. But it's something that we must learn from. Moshe is called Rabbeinu. That's our model. He's our teacher. So it might mean that you won't be a part of the wagon. Okay, so what? So you'll be the greatest prophet of all times.
Rabbi, I have
Yes,
a couple of questions regarding this paragraph. It made me think a lot.
yeah.
So, um, it says in here at some point that a person who is a chariot undergoes a nearly biological metamorphosis and becomes a progenitor of a new line.
Hmm.
So that implies that Moses, Aaron, and Joseph, who were sort of excluded from this wagon concept, they were not progenitor of a new line. And that's the reason why they're not a wagon. So that's one question. The second question
Right.
is about David being the fourth leg. So the fourth leg, why is it called the fourth leg? It's like, you have, let's say, a car. I mean, it has four wheels. I mean, even if you remove a wheel, it can still sort of balance on three. It's not perfect. So I'm just saying, is it David like a second thought addition to this wagon? I don't know. These are just things that just
No,
mulling in my mind.
right. And yeah, I don't know how many miles you can travel with just three wheels,
Yeah, not
but
really many, but
unless it's a Ferrari from Torino,
oh,
then
oh my
it's a
God, oh my
different
God, the
story.
rumors go fast here. I can't believe this.
No, no, I'm just saying because you're Italian. But I'm thinking that David, I don't know, he wasn't like a second thought. Let's add David. I think that David's part, the reason he's part of the wagon is because David suffered a lot, in order to fight for God's truth. He could have very easily succumbed to King Saul, who had become corrupt, and say, you know what, fine, I'll do whatever you want. I'll agree with whatever you say. And then he would have spent himself years and years of being chased because King Saul wanted to kill him.
Right.
And for that truth, he completely nullified himself, his safety and security, and to be one with God. So it's like he deserved certainly to be in that wagon. That makes you a part of your wagon. When you can undergo such, I don't know of anyone else in history who underwent so many years of hiding, of escaping, of sacrifice, of bashing, of having his own family turn on him. Avshalom, his son, joined, King Saul's, joined the enemies, and became a part of that tremendous suffering that King David had to endure. All that because, again, he was nullified. It wasn't about him. So I think that David certainly deserved to be on that to be that fourth wheel. But regarding the metamorphosis that these people, almost biological, right? Nearly biological metamorphosis
Yeah.
Rabbi Steinzel speaks about, I think that those people underwent that type of metamorphosis. It's not that the others didn't go any metamorphosis. They maybe didn't undergo nearly, as they call it, nearly biological metamorphosis, but they certainly went through other types of metamorphoses. I would say that Moshe went through a tremendous metamorphosis, because when God asked him to become the leader of the Jewish people, as we all know, he refused time and time again. And he almost had to say, okay, from now on, my persona as I knew it will cease to be. And that's it. Now I have to step into this leadership role. It's going to consume me. And the persona that I had, it's going to have to be shed completely. That's a metamorphosis.
But then why is not a chariot?
Because again, there are times he wrestled with God,
Okay.
before God, but he still wrestled with God. It's the difference, I would say, between being a slave, a servant, and being a partner, a wife, a spouse, husband. So both are one. Slave is one with his master. Slave can't do anything without his master. And not only that, but he has to abide to every single order of his master. So he's a wagon. A husband or a wife or a partner or very close, even a business partner, right? They are not slaves. They don't just follow every rule. but they are one.
Mhm.
But they have the ability to wrestle, to say, sorry, I don't think this is right. So it's a different type of oneness. It's a oneness in which I don't lose myself, but it's a oneness that it alludes more to harmony. The oneness of a slave to his master alludes more maybe to unity, where I completely one.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Also, Moshe, the whole reason that Miriam and Aaron and Miriam was stricken with Tzaraat was because he had moved on. He wasn't with his wife anymore. He wasn't. So biologically, he was actually separate at that point in a different way than the others were.
Yes. That's right. That's a good point. He also chose a different, like, biological part, you say. Yeah, I would add to that. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Very good. Okay, let's just do maybe one more paragraph, unless there's other comments. Okay, Jewish tradition.
Jewish tradition also gives tangible expression to this concept. The Talmid Chacham, Torah scholar, described in the Talmud, is not only one who has studied, but one who has become an integral extension of sanctity. He himself constitutes a sanctuary to God. The concept that one who brings a present to the Talmid Chacham is as one who offers bikurim, first fruits at the temple, or Torah scholars atone and protect like the altar, relates to the understanding that the patriarchs are the chariot, the essential, almost physical unity with the holiness that is every Jew's legacy.
Right. In many ways, that's why, again, the Talmid Chacham in these examples and other places too are in many ways representatives of God. And when one brings bikurim, first fruits, to Talmid Chacham, it's as if he's offering it to God, because they become so one with God that they channel godliness. And that godliness is really the best representation that God has here on earth. By the way, I think that just the concept of Talmid Chacham also refers to what we're speaking about. See, it's interesting because we call our sages Talmid Chacham. What does that mean? It doesn't mean sage. It's a wrong translation. Talmid Chacham means the student of wisdom. They are so one, they are so nullified. The ego is so nullified that they know that they'll never be able to arrive. They're always in a permanent state of being students of wisdom. They'll never be the wisdom themselves. They are students of wisdom. They recognize that they always have so much to learn. And that in and of itself is what makes them one. When I think I've arrived, then when I am wisdom, then God can't influence me anymore. Then I am an entity in and of itself. And that sometimes can just clash with any other entity because I occupy space. But when I empty out that space and I recognize that I need to let God in because I need to learn from him all the time, I'm that permanent student, that's when I can become one with God. So that's why Talmid Chacham is called the Talmid Chacham. By the way, the Greeks stole that from us. They did. But they did that in a very distasteful way, because they call their sages philosophers, right? Which means the lovers of wisdom. Philo, Sophie. The lovers of wisdom. Not the students of wisdom, the lovers of wisdom. Love has a little ego. So it's not such a good copy. But students of wisdom have zero ego, and that's why they can become one with God. Talmid Chacham.